Hello, everyone, and welcome back into the Everyday Strength Podcast. Today's episode kicks off episode 1 of our conditioning series. So today I want to begin by simply defining conditioning and how we can separate that from cardio, okay? How we can build and develop these energy systems within our body to be able to power performance and activity, and then also be able to perform better by being able to utilize energy better. And so, to kick it off, I like to separate cardio from conditioning. So the general gym bro, fitness enthusiast, they view cardio as just that, right? Like cardio is getting on a treadmill and walking for 45 minutes. Cardio is 30 minutes on the Stairmaster. Cardio is riding a spin bike for 25 minutes, whatever it might be. But in reality, cardio is not conditioning. So cardio helps us to burn calories. Okay, we increase caloric expenditure. We burn way more calories than just at rest. It's not a whole lot more. If you really get down to it, you might talk about 100 to 200 calories more, ultimately depending on the intensity. But if you're doing something for 45 minutes, 60 minutes, the intensity can't be as high. And so calorie burn is elevated, and most people will use cardio to burn off extra calories with the end goal of being able to reduce body fat. But that's separate from conditioning. So today's episode, I want to get into that. Cardio, yes, people will tout heart health, right? Will tout better metabolic health, so better glucose disposal, better mitochondria, and all of that is certainly true to some extent, but whenever we're developing conditioning and developing our energy systems, we also get a lot more out of that. And it can be something that's way more applicable for someone who wants to go and run a marathon, for someone who wants to compete in a CrossFit event, for someone who just wants to be better than kind of an average, fitness enthusiast, right? You don't want to be average, right? We want to be better than average. And so for those individuals who may have that separation or that trouble separating conditioning and cardio, this is where we get right into it. So again, if the end goal is to work up a good sweat, maybe burn a few more calories, then cardio at the end of the day is fine. Okay, doing traditional cardio, whether it's maybe some intervals, maybe 10 minutes of a minute on, minute off, 30 minutes, minute on, minute off, whatever it might be. Maybe it's 45 minutes, low intensity, steady state. If you're doing it for general heart health, if you're doing it for extra calorie burn, then you're probably okay. But if you are wanting to develop performance and be able to sustain more for longer, be able to push harder and higher, especially for longer there as well, then we need to start focusing our efforts on actually developing our conditioning. And so today we're going to define, which we've already done a really good job of defining conditioning, but also defining energy system development. And so over the next 3 episodes in this series, I'm going to show you what conditioning actually is. We'll define the energy systems. We'll define the 3 energy systems within there and go into some pretty good detail there and how our body produces energy. And then we'll also lay out the methods. And I'm not going to lay out every single method because there's over probably 30 different methods that we can use. But we'll lay out a few of the key critical methods that we can use to develop those energy systems and develop a robust conditioning base. And so, if you're an everyday recreational athlete, if you play a pickup basketball game on the weekend, if you're a dad who wants to be able to keep up with their kids and do so to a higher level, you value your performance, this is going to be that series for you to really kind of understand that missing element in a lot of people's programming. Every program that I write involves conditioning, every single one. It may not be extreme high levels of CrossFit type conditioning, but we're going to at least touch on basic aerobic conditioning. We'll probably touch on a little bit of glycolytic conditioning. just to be able to increase that output and just to be able to go longer better. So let's talk about these a little bit and first kind of start with the misunderstanding around conditioning. So, we've already kind of decided that cardio is that steady state jog, steady state bike, steady state ride, steady state walking. It might be high intensity intervals, maybe even some CrossFit style workouts, and those can have value, but they're incomplete whenever it comes right down to it. And so conditioning shouldn't just be about working up a good sweat. It shouldn't just be about being tired and being fatigued after it. There should be some type of a progression to it. I harp on progression because most programs don't have a progression model. But with good conditioning, you should be able to progress. You should be able to measure and see these changes. You should know what the next step is and how we can attain that next step. So I want to kind of peel back what's happening in the body, what's happening, deeper at the cellular level, within the muscles, within our tissues in the body, and just ultimately how our body is able to feel movement. So first we need to get a little physiological, okay? Stay with me, but this is a foundation. And if you can understand how our bodies use and produce energy, what our energy is, then you can start to understand conditioning methods a little bit more and in a lot more detail. So ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, is the energy currency that our body uses to produce energy. Okay, just like your car uses gasoline, right? Our bodies use ATP. Now, how do we get ATP is different based off of intensities, but literally every muscle contraction, everything that you do, me right here doing a podcast, you on a treadmill running, your body is using ATP. Every muscle contraction, every nerve signal, it all relies on adenosine triphosphate. It's like money in your checking account, okay? You can spend it every time that you move, and if you can't replenish it fast enough, if you can't regenerate it and make new, then you're going to go bankrupt, aka fatigue. That's what it manifests as. And so when the phosphate bond breaks off of ATP, so you've got 3 phosphates, okay, breaks down to 2, it becomes ADP. Energy is then released, and then you're left with that ADP, adenosine diphosphate. The body's job is to then resynthesize ATP, basically attach that phosphate back on and do that over and over and over again. Okay. And you don't have just one way to make ATP. Our body needs this, right? We need it so much that we need to have multiple pathways, multiple ways to generate new ATP. And that's where the energy systems come in. Okay. We have multiple systems in the body that are working simultaneously at different speeds, using different fuel sources, at different rates and capacities to be able to regenerate and continuously make ATP. That is the essence of energy system development. If you understand that, you know more than most people on how our bodies produce power and produce work, okay? But now let's get into the multiple systems. So I already mentioned that our body has backups, okay? A simple analogy, and I'm going to use this a lot, is basically like a transmission, okay? Gears on a car, right? So our first gear is an incredibly high torque, short amount of effort, right? This is going that 0 to 60 test as quick as we can to get down, to the line. That's that first gear. The second gear is more sustainable, but it's still pretty high power, right? Here we're carrying speed, but we're able to go a little bit longer with that. Maybe this is the mile. Okay, how quickly can we do a mile? And then that third gear is cruise control. This is going from New York to Los Angeles, okay? Efficient. It's not explosive. It's not fast, but you can get there, right? If you just coast at 70 miles an hour, 80 miles an hour, some states, right? You can get there, and that's on that third gear. Okay, so now let's dive into what those gears actually are and how our bodies use it. So the same applies to your physiology, okay? So for max effort, short duration work, highly explosive, a heavy squat, right? A sled sprint for 10 meters, 800-yard dash, right? You're relying on phosphocreatine. For more medium duration, but still high intensity work, like a little bit longer, like a quarter mile, a 400-meter run, maybe extended sled pushes that may last up to 45, 60 seconds. Okay, here we're using glycolysis, basically breaking down glucose or glycogen within the body to be able to generate that ATP to then provide the energy needed to do that activity. And then for our longer duration efforts, our recovery efforts, we're depending on oxidative phosphorylation, metabolism that's more aerobic, using oxygen, fat, mitochondria. Those are all working, and those are constantly working. Even at rest, we're using that oxidative metabolism to be able to burn fats at a nice slow rate to be able to sustain us, for the long term. Key here is that these systems overlap. They're not on-off switches, okay? So even when you're sprinting, your aerobic system is running quietly in the background. It's ready to go to help with recovery as soon as that effort ends, but it's still running all the time. On the flip side, right, you start to go out for a zone 2 run, you're going to use the phosphocreatine system at the beginning of that to start that movement. Okay, but that system's going to slowly dwindle, and then our oxidative metabolism will take over as we continue on. The differences here is in terms of the fuel tank and the speed. Okay, so our fastest has a small fuel tank, right? If we're running a sprint, we can only maintain that sprint for a very short period of time. The slowest has a nearly endless fuel tank, but it's not as quick. So that's why being able to train all of these three and being able to develop them as they're needed is important and critical for that performance element that we refer to, right? Performance in your life, performance in a sport, even if it's pickup basketball on the weekends, it's going to demand that seamless transition between the gears, okay? So now let's get a little bit into the terminology here and where conditioning is it's one domain and energy system development is a separate domain. So I like to think of energy system development more as what's actually happening, and conditioning more as the work that we're doing to develop those energy systems. Okay, they could be two in one, right? They can be the same thing, but if we separate them out a little bit, one's more of the methods, one's more of the end goal. Okay, so conditioning is what you experience. Okay, that's the result. That's the outcome that we're looking for. Your ability to sustain output, repeat efforts, be able to recover faster between sessions or between sets even. Energy system development is the process. Okay, this is the physiology and the programming that improve these underlying systems. So when we train this intelligently, we're developing all three systems. We don't just get in shape when the time comes. Okay. We've talked about residuals before. I've written some blog articles on residuals. I've done a podcast on residuals. And that's where that type of work comes into play. Because if we know how long certain energy systems will last, we know that we may not need to train them all the time. But if we know that others can last longer, then we may not need to train them while we focus on other ones. Now, that's the beauty of conjugate, is we don't have to train all three at the same time, but we can manipulate our training to be able to do so, to build a big, robust tank. I always keep that aerobic conditioning in to develop the oxidative system, because it's hard to build. It's very slow to build, but it's also the slowest to maintain. So whenever the time comes that we've got an event, we need to start to build up our phosphagen system. We need to start to build up our glycolytic system. We can scale back and modulate our volume on the oxidative side and start to ramp up the other two, because we know that it's going to last longer than the other short-lived phosphocreatine and glycolytic systems. The end goal is to be able to be more efficient at producing this ATP. That's ultimately what it comes down to. Whenever we say you're more fit, whenever you feel on the runs that you're able to go longer or go faster, keep up a higher pace, okay, the end goal is that you are now more efficient at producing ATP or regenerating ATP. So that shows up as that better endurance, that faster recovery, that higher work capacity. So now, why does this all matter, right? The understanding of these energy systems can change how you view your training, how you program. So instead of simply chasing exhaustion, instead of simply going for 45 minutes every single day on the treadmill just to get more lean, okay, you can now start to chase adaptation and actually see improvements, be able to see the work happening and the processes happening. And that's ultimately the whole purpose of this series that we're going to lay out. Okay. So we're going to bring the science back into the conditioning. Now, a little bit of a preview of what's to kind of come. Some of the other episodes will get a little bit more heavy whenever we start to break down the actual systems, breaking down, how ATP is generated through each of these. Those are going to be very physiologically heavy because there's a lot to kind of get into. It's not going to be quite a bioenergetics lecture, but I want to be able to develop your understanding and just kind of bring you that so that right? So now we've defined conditioning. We've talked about how the body actually makes our energy, and then we'll start to dive into the gears themselves, right? We'll go over the aerobic system, the glycolytic system, the phosphagen systems in extreme detail. And we'll break down what each one does, how they can overlap, and then the adaptations that they start to drive. And then that third episode, we're going to get into more of the methods. That's going to be the fun, very applied episode, okay? How do we train to be more aerobically fit? How do we train to be more glycolytically fit? Okay, what are the methods that I use and how do we program them? When should we program them? What tools should we use to be able to develop those systems and just become more effective at developing a really good conditioning program and also a really good conditioning base? So conditioning isn't cardio. That's the takeaway from today. It's energy production. Okay, it's your body's ability to do work, recover, and do it again, over and over and over again. All right, and with that wraps up episode 1 of this conditioning series from the Everyday Strength Podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. And I will catch you next week when we dive into episode 2. Thank you for tuning in.